we are producing music in my front yard. Our first concert every year for the last 3 years, it started before COVID, or early COVID. And I went to a concert in somebody's front yard, and on the way home, I said, wow, that's cool, we could do that. You know, to my wife, we could have people over here. And then COVID hit, and I called a few musicians that I knew, and I said, what would it cost to get you to perform in my front yard? And they said, cost? Just get me an audience. There's nobody to play. There's nothing going on. So that's kind of how it started, and it just grew. I mean, right now, I have hundreds of people that show up. We do it all summer long. We have the greatest musicians around town, and occasionally some from other parts of the country that know these musicians. So anyhow, it's a great concert. So, and with the first concert was on Bob Dylan's birthday, May 24th. And so that's kind of our annual first concert every year. Well, the first year with Bob Dylan's birthday, I went to a local liquor store and I asked if they'd be willing to donate some Heaven's Door liquor that we could raffle off. And they said yes, and they gave me a couple bottles and we raffled it off, and that was good. So then I go to the...
I was in the raffle, I didn't win.
Oh, you did? Okay, well, yeah, it's interesting.
I got a t-shirt though, back here.
Oh, well, that was early on, that's good. Yeah, and so anyhow, so then I go to Tulsa for the Dylan Museum, and they had a big party the first night, which Heaven's Door had a big representation there. And so I went to the Heaven's Door and I said, hey, and I told them what we did. And they said, that's a good idea, we'd like to be involved with that. Let me introduce you to my boss, the guy says. Okay, so this 25-year-old kid walks up to me and says, I said, you're the boss? Yeah. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I'm the distiller. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, I make the whiskey, I put it in a flask, and go to New York and drink with Bob. that's a cooler job
than anything
I know. But then I told him, he said, well, let me think about it. And before I left, he contacted me, he said, yeah, we want to be involved with that. We'll furnish you the liquor, and we'll also give you some special stuff. And so they did, and they gave me a leather book with a special bottle of bourbon in it that was made of Spanish leather, and the boots of Spanish leather, the lyrics were written on the side of it, and this $1,000 bottle of bourbon or $600 bottle of bourbon was in there. And we raffled that off to a final show that was a year ago now. And I called him again this year, and I thanked him, of course, and I said, we're doing it again. Are you interested? Absolutely. How many concerts are you doing? So we're gonna raffle off Bob Dylan's liquor this year. There's a new Bob Dylan liquor.
It's Minnesota themed, right?
It's distilled in Minnesota. And I said, where? He says, well, I can't tell you. I'd have to kill you if I tell you. I thought it was Duluth, but they wouldn't admit it, so I don't know. But it's distilled in Minnesota, and it's a step up. It's a more expensive bottle of bourbon. But they're going to try to give me some of those, they said. So we'll see. So this year I'm going to raffle off Bob Dylan's liquor again. My whole point was, at one point, when I talked to this guy about the first bottle we raffled off, the first year was a bottle, he said, how would you like it autographed? I said, that'd be cool. So Bob Dylan autographed the very first bottle. I think that was the next year you were involved. So the very first bottle was an autographed bottle. And the guy that won it still owns it. And every time I see him, I say, I take that bottle from you when it's empty, because he said, all I want is the bourbon. So, and I just saw him, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago at Crooner's, and I said, how's that? Well, I still have a little left, but I'll keep you in mind. So I'm waiting for that bottle. What I told him is I knew somebody who would be interested in buying that bottle. And the person I knew that would be interested would be me. But I didn't know him that. Sorry about that. But, that was, so I said to the Heaven's Door guy about the autograph, I said, wow, that's really cool that I get an autographed bottle. He said, well, I had to clear it with Bob. And I said, well, that's wonderful. And I said, so what does he know? I said, oh, he knows. He knows what we're doing. So Bob knows we're doing that. I don't know if he knows we're doing it for 3 years every year, but he knew the very first one. And so that was, I had a feeling that he was not unhappy that it was associated with music. And in fact, I said we're going to donate the money to a public radio station here in town. And he said, well, Bob has a fund he likes to donate to. I said, oh, no problem, we'll do that. And then he got back to me, he said, no, Bob said, go ahead to give it to the radio stations, which was kind of cool. So I know he's somewhat in touch with what I do, and hopefully he's, he's respectful of the fact that I am doing it in honor of him, and I don't know, it's I don't know, I would love to talk to him. I would love to sit and talk to him. My wife says, let's have him over for Thanksgiving some year, which is like the joke of the year. But I would love to talk to him. I'd love to talk to him about Larry, because I really never did talk to him about that. And I want to talk to him about his radio show, Theme Time Radio Hour. I mean, what a remarkable show that is. And that is, listening to that show.
It's got to remind you of Bob Zimmerman, right?
Exactly. That is my closest, I mean, more so than when I'm on tour with him. Because when I'm on tour with him, he was with, but listening to that radio show and the way he talks about everything, and he has his researchers that do it, it's like the kind of conversations we would have sitting on the bench next to the radio, or next to the lake, or, in his hotel rooms. That is very much, so I'd love to just tell him how wonderful that show is. When I travel, and when I travel by air, I listen on headsets to that show. I listen to it over and over. I've heard them all every time, and it's so remarkably good. But I also, would love to tell him how my life has been so affected by him, by, hey, he knows it's Bob Dylan. These musicians come, they always play a Bob Dylan tune. They always say, oh, we're doing this because Dick knows, but they don't know. They think I know Bob Dylan. They don't actually have that whole relationship. They think I'm a buddy. Oh, you went to camp with him, I know. You went to a Jewish camp, or what they say, you went to a Jewish temple with him, as one guy said, and I had to go correct him. I said, no, I went to temple with the camp. But anyhow, so it's just kind of just being, touching base with him gives me a persona that I love, and I try not to take advantage of, but I have to admit that these musicians that I'm now friendly with, I've been into music all my life. I always loved music. I was always a listener from before Bob. I used to hear, I went to, there's a theaters in downtown St. Paul, Roy Wilkins Auditorium, that would have these tours come through with Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Big Bopper, and I went to that. I don't even know why I went. I just did go. And my parents were interested in me, take me down and drop me off and pick me up. And so I used to go to live music before I even remembered what live music was all about. I never was into performing. I was never good at it. I tried one time playing guitar, and I just couldn't do it very well. But anyhow, but I appreciate music, and I appreciate the musicians that I now know because of the Front Yard concerts. I became friends with a bunch of them, and I love it. I love the association. I mean, a bunch of new friends. It's tough to make new friends when you're over 80 years old, but I've been fortunate enough to be able to, and the ones I made are, kind of in the music business somehow,
Yeah, my wife and I talk about that all the time, that like there's so much of our lives that, people we know and where we go, it's so much dictated by our Bob Dylan fandom. It's very unusual. I find that's a really interesting aspect of Bob, and that he's touched so many lives and done so many different things, that like there's this whole universe that exists around him almost. So I'm wondering, you being around him so much, he's had that since the 1960s, that there's so much beyond his control, like the aura and the mystique. Yeah, did you ever get the sense that, he knows about that?
He knows about it, he doesn't like it. My feeling is he really doesn't like it. What do you mean? What do they call me a Messiah? What do they, I told him that Messiah story, and he said, what, people are nuts, what are they thinking? He doesn't quite, I guess I'd have to say he appreciates it, but he doesn't get it, he doesn't know why it's so phenomenal. He doesn't think he's anything, he's a song and dance man, as he says,
But I think he's fairly humble about it, and he's developed a way to cope with it. It seems like
I
he kind of
guess-
live a fairly normal life and not
Yeah.
let it drive him insane, right?
Yes, exactly. It doesn't drive me insane. He definitely has a shyness to him. There's a shyness that he likes being under the hood. He likes being under his hoodie or a towel over his head. He's very shy, and it doesn't matter. One time he said to me, we're not staying in the same hotel the next night. I said, oh, really? Why? He says, well, Bill Clinton wants to talk to me, and he knows the hotel, so we're going to stay in a different hotel. I mean, he hides from Bill Clinton. Think about that. That's how he had to go that far. And
What do you make of that dichotomy that he's a live performer who, he's trying to get attention, when he was playing those talent shows in school, like he always wanted to be famous and be successful, but yet on a personal level, he's introverted.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, that's, it's, could be on the spectrum. Some people have said that there's a shyness. I mean, geniuses often have that part of it. And I mean, there's no question he's a genius. Not just his words, not his music, his art, his paintings, his exhibit. Have you ever seen his art exhibits?
Yeah, I have some of the books. I haven't seen them in
Oh,
person.
no, I mean, they're so realistic, and the lighting, and there's a car in a rainstorm that you could touch it, you'd feel it was wet. He's so remarkable. A very creative guy. At the museum in Tulsa, there's a large metal sculpture that is standing by the front door that's probably 50 feet high and 5 feet wide, made up of metal parts that he uses, a big wheel and a wrench and all that, made up of that they say he sourced all that stuff from Oklahoma and did that piece from Oklahoma art. Now, did I believe that he went out to a garage sale and found a wrench? Not too sure about that. I believe he has people, that do that. But it wouldn't surprise me that he said, hey, I want a big wheel and this big, and someone said, well, I know where there's one, let's go get it. And, that could have happened. He could have been involved with that. But so that particular piece, which is very much like everything he's done, but just blown up. The scale is so much bigger. And that's just the way, he just is such a genius about so many things. He's very intuitive. People would say, Bob knows everything that's going on around him. And that was kind of the word. Don't worry, Bob knows everything that's going on around him. And like when he caught me taking a picture of the bus, and that I agree with that. He does. I don't know how. I don't know why. He's very observant. He's very, listen to his words. What he's accumulating and just out of life and out of everything, and how he brings it back. A lot of people don't get into it at that level or understand it at that level. I'm not sure I do, but I appreciate what he does, and it's an honor to have been around him. Every second I spent with him was just an honor. I wish I'd appreciated it as much at the time as I do now. At the time it was, oh, whoa, this is good, exciting, and it's there. But I like to have had the hindsight. I wish I knew then what I know now, or however they say that.
Was that fame something that, were you ever awestruck, or was people like you and Larry that knew the Bobby Zimmerman behind it all? Did it always feel like, oh, it's just Bobby Zimmerman, or were there times where the aura was kind of overwhelming?
No, I always felt it was Bob Zimmerman, and yes, the aura was there, and the people around him, and except walking around the park at 3 o'clock in the morning, pushing Larry in the wheelchair, that was the most human I've ever seen him. He's a superhuman, but that was really a special time. And at the time, I didn't think that much about it. I thought, oh yeah, well, gee, maybe I should push the wheelchair. Why is why is Bob pushing the wheelchair? You know, here, let me push that. No, no, I'll do it. So it was like, I don't know, at the time it wasn't as important to me as when I look back and say, wow, you know, Bob pushing that wheelchair around the lake, talking about one of the concerts we were at in Wisconsin, the power went out in the building and the emergency lights went on and there was no power. And so Bob was standing at the microphone, he goes and he grabs a bell, a cowbell, and he just starts beating out the rhythm on a cowbell and saying, the lights will come on, don't worry, you know, and stuff, but nobody's hearing him, there's no microphone, but, you know, and then he came off stage and the drum kept playing. And he came off stage and he said to Larry, he says, well, where am I, in Mexico? What's going on here? Well, it was like being in Mexico. And so that was kind of an interesting experience. I was more fascinated with the fact that the power had gone out and the grips were taking these power cables, dragging them outside in a rainstorm, up a telephone pole and clipping them on there to bring power in. And I thought, my God, look at those guys. They really know what they're doing, those electric guys. And so that was my thing, but the fact that he just held control of that audience in the dark, it could have been very bad, but he kept it mellow. That was kind of an interesting event. And that's when, you know, and I remember talking about that later with he and Larry and saying, talking about Mexico, how the things would like that happen in Mexico, not in, how did it happen in Wisconsin. And I don't know, that was an interesting time. Kind of had forgotten about that one actually.
So one of the what I'm working on, I just was part of that Bob Dylan in Minnesota book, and I really had to kind of like summarize what I wanted to say in that book. But for future projects, I'm hoping to do a full book about just Bob in Minnesota. So kind of one of the things I've kind of observed is that, like, you know, Bob obviously like got in over his head with fame and everything in the '60s, and you know, obviously when he was in New York and California, those were like, a lot was demanded of him and asked of him and like professionally, but like Minnesota was a place where he could go back and kind of relax and get away from it all. So right. What did you kind of observe as far as what he thought of being back in Minnesota?
Yeah, no, he definitely, he'd come back here. He spent his 50th birthday here, and I wasn't there, but they had an event out at Bob's farm. I think Gino was there, I'm not positive, but there's a photograph that Alfonso, Larry's helper, took of Bob and Larry, Bob blowing out the candles and the light from the candles. I mean, I wish I owned that photo. I don't know where it is. I think probably Carol probably has his old girlfriend. But it's a great photo. But he would come here and he'd drive around in a convertible. He had a Cadillac convertible that he would drive, and we'd go to the Guthrie. One time, Chris Christopherson was in town doing an event for an Indian school called Little Red Schoolhouse, Indian school here in town, and Buffy St. Marie and Chris Christopherson were doing an event there, and I remember Larry picking them up and having Buffy St. Marie in the back of the thing playing that Jew's harp or whatever she played, that harp, and just driving around and going and meeting Bob in his convertible, pulling up and him getting out and snagging, but then saying hello to everybody and then leaving. So yeah, he was definitely around. I mean, he was around, and I think he was very much incognito. I mean, he didn't, you know, I don't know how public he was. The people who knew him, but if he would have drawn a crowd. In fact, yeah, you know, there was one time we were at the Guthrie, he was watching something at the Guthrie, and we were walking out and people recognized him, and he ran like hell, you know, he jumped in his car, you know, and Christopherson kind of jumped in and became the hero, here it's me, here, I'll sign stuff for you, leave Bob alone, you know. It was pretty cool how Chris handled that.
Have you ever been out to his farm in Hanover?
Yeah, I have. I haven't been in the building. I was in his farm one time in the barn part where he has a bunch of guitars and motorcycles. He wasn't there. But no, one time Gino recorded a record and said he wanted Bob to hear it, and we went out late at night and stuck one in his mailbox. But no, I've never really been at his farm. Larry was there one time. There's a river that runs through a canoe, a small creek runs through his farm, and Larry went out there with Paul White and another guy. All of them are dead now that I think about it. What was that guy's name? Anyhow, yeah. All of those, Larry and Paul and the other guy were dead. Anyhow, what they did, they put Larry in the canoe, and they canoed down this creek up to Bob's property. And
It's the Crow River, right?
yeah, right, Crow River. And I was supposed to be there for that, but so I couldn't. I don't remember why I didn't, but I didn't go. And I always was sorry I didn't go to help Larry do that. But Larry had been out there a couple of times, and I know that New Year's Eve, they did New Year's Eve there one time, and then they did Bob's birthday. That Louis was at the birthday. Larry, Louis, and Bob were the only ones at the birthday party, I remember. And then the New Year's Eve, Gino tells a story about Spider John and those guys being out there. I think that Bob didn't respect me because I wasn't a musician for a long time. I mean, I really think that. And Larry turned out to be a musician. I mean, he sang, he was quite musical. And of course, Gino, I think Bob really respected Gino because he was a musician. I don't think Gino was ever as close to him as I was, but I wasn't a musician. He has a thing about musicians. Old friends are another story. And again, I think over the years of being with him for 20 years for a week at a time, he became more tolerable of me being around, or willing to have me around, you know. Okay, so Larry Kegan one time gave me a bootleg, cassettes, a book, and he wrote in it was for my birthday. He said, Dick, I hope you're inspired as much by this guy as I have been. Have a great birthday, your friend Larry Kegan, which he used a rubber stamp to stamp his name. And so I have that. And so I'd be backstage with Bob, and these kids would come in and ask for his autograph, and I'd just stand there and think, God, I wish I could get one, but I was too close to him. I can't do that. So we're in a van at a gas station filling up. Bob comes and gets in the van, and I had this book with me, and I said, I'm going to do it. I said, Bob, Larry gave me this book for my birthday. It's your songs, and he signed it. Would you be willing to sign it? And someone told me a long time ago that he likes signing books. He likes signing paper. He doesn't like signing anything else. So this was his book. And he said, oh, no problem. So he writes in it, he says, Dick, every song in this book was written for you. Your friend Bob Zimmerman, have a happy birthday. And he signed it. I have that book to this day. And I thought, oh, wow, every song written. At the museum in Minneapolis that had the Bob Dylan exhibit years ago, also it was in New York when I saw it, they had a big glass table, probably 4 foot by 4 foot square glass table, full of autographs, stuff that people had signed. Half of them said, every song in this album was written for you. Every song in the book, that was his signature for some people. So it wasn't as personal as I thought it would be, but it's my one and only autographed Bob Dylan piece.
He didn't sign it Bob Zimmerman, did he? Did he sign it Bob Dylan?
Bob Dylan.
He did sign it Bob
Did
Dylan.
I say that?
Yeah, you said Bob Zimmerman.
No, Bob Dylan. He said it.
Yeah, he's Bob Zimmerman to you.
No,